Thank you so much for staying tuned to this channel. Welcome to another edition of International Forum. I am Wilson Marshall. Well, today from now till about 2 o'clock, we'll be doing the talk because from 2, there's going to be, AFCON live marches and the rest of them. Well, it's all about what is happening in Kazakhstan right now, talking about a crisis occasioned by an increase in gas price, increase in fuel pump price, and that didn't really go down well with the citizens, and they started protesting, started rioting, and the government led by Kazim Tokayev was like deploying severe measures. According to reports, the force was so brutal that some persons lost their life in all of this. Come on. And now he's calling Russia for help. Don't forget that Kazakhstan was once part of the great Soviet Union, and Russia spreading their military here and there in the former region of the USSR. Do you think Russia is beginning to gain prominence in all of this? With me here in the studio to talk about this, I have a vibrant youth and entrepreneur, politician, human rights activists, philanthropists. Join me to welcome Sonny Atiosa. Welcome to International Forum. I appreciate your coming.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Yes. Right. I know that you've traveled far and wide. And of course, you've been to some countries. You know how they react when you talk about government policies, implementation. Now let's zoom it down to Afghanistan, an increase in gas price. Is that really enough to cause that rampage?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Afghanistan or Kazakhstan?
Sorry, Kazakhstan, begging your pardon.
Well, anything that's got to do with things that happens in a certain plane or zones or areas of this world can actually lead to any form of protest. What happens from there is how far the protest is taken. Whether or not people push it a bit and then pull back and dialogue, or whether they keep pushing it forever. I mean, Kazakhstan, as you know, is in the Asian continent, kind of close to the Russian hemisphere sort of area. And that region perhaps was part of the USSR.
Yeah.
Out of the breakage. They've never really had it that cool in most cases. And people there behave in a certain way and manner. They're very hostile in most cases. They consider themselves very tough, like a Russian KGB. They have that sort of mentality. And when you look along those regions and parts of the world, democracy has always had its ups and downs. They've always had a kind of questionable approach to many things. So things like cooking gas are something that will cause uprising. I'm sure you know when the poorer population is engulfed in what they feel they rely on to get their everyday life going, because the only two things you work for is what you put on your belly and as well how you take care of your family. Then you should expect those sort of things to cause problems and create uprising that perhaps in this case, if it's not put under control quickly, can result to a different whole ballgame.
Now, let's take a look at the action of President Kazim towards this problem in Kazakhstan. The first thing he did was to sack the government of the day, saying they are part and parcel of what is really going on in Kazakhstan. You talk about Almaty, one of the cities in Kazakhstan. It's like the riot just took an unprecedented turn to the extent that protesters are not beginning to squabble, to fight with the anti-riot police personnel just for peace to for the protesters to press home their demands. Sacking of the government of the day, do you think is a solution?
Well, I don't personally think that is a solution. I'm not the sort of guy that's ever sat there and support violence and uprising. And even in the instance of Nigeria, when the NSAS played out at the time, I made my position known that there are better ways we could have dealt with these things. Yes, something have to trigger something, but then dialogue and sitting on the table is always the best way forward in achieving the best results. And I will always speak for that sort of like peaceful resolution. Where they are now in Kazakhstan, it's just moving from fire pan to fire. Because sacking the government already can tell you that there's already a political undertone.
Political undertone?
Yes. And there are maybe people who don't particularly maybe like the current government of the day, and if the problem that has existed there has been there for a very long time, at the end of the day, it's not gonna be solved now by uprising on this level, because uprising practically means breakdown of law and order. And when you look at countries of this recent time that has gone through the instrumentalism of war, they would, with hindsight, and when they think back, they are assuming that, well, I wish we never got involved into this. It's just like I want to talk about the wasted 3 million people that died during the Nigerian Civil War. I wish we can bring them back. You know, Libya, they are going through their phase now. They wish they never got involved in getting Gaddafi to leave the way they did. And it is easy to destroy than to rebuild. And that is one of the things that a lot of the people who get involved don't know. And when the exposed minds and some of the people who are politically inclined that has probably living in a different calmer climate with their families are igniting and fueling uprising in the country, irrespective of the government's doings, whether it is right or wrong, they're in a safe haven and asking you to destroy yourself. So to me, I don't, in a country like Kazakhstan, like I told you, people who has that Russian mentality, if you ever known them, if you've been to Poland, Czechoslovakia, Slovakia, I have a lot of friends from there, I've been to those countries, they will tell you that they are the tough black guys, you know, they're the tough guys. And none of those governments will succumb to those people. They will constantly, you know, get to use whatever means they need to get involved with, which is in this case is violence, until calm is restored. And to me, that is a very negative thing, because the government of Kazakhstan, as far as I know, has been in power since 1991. So an establishment and a system that has been in power since 1991 till date, that is a whole lot of time. That's many years down the line. You know, so at the end of the day, to just sack a government that has probably been there, maybe through democratic means for the last 20 years, that's like an established institution, a very strong one. And they have the ISCA, they have the army, they have the police and whatnot. I think, I just feel bad for the people, really.
Now, all right, now some of the opinion that the measures used by the anti-riot policemen, even the military, on the protesters is like uncalled for. There was a report where they use cannons, they use steam, they use even live ammunition to quell protests. What do you feel about that method used by President Kazim of Kazakhstan to quell this squabble?
Well, whenever I speak, because we're speaking on a particular region and the way they do things there and the thing, I will constantly refer back to the bedrock of how their democracy is established and the kind of mindset that revolves around it. If you go back to history and you see where Georgia had problems with Russia, it got to a point that Russia moved the military in and they almost got the president, and then he had to behave because I think he was trying to do stuff in alliance with the United States, and Russia said, we ain't having none of that in our territory. And Kazakhstan is no different. If you take a couple of years back and you look at what happened in Crimea, in Ukraine, you know, the Russians practically went into Ukraine and annexed a particular section of Ukraine because they have so much military power in the Russian Federation. They were able to kind of come to Edo State and go to somewhere like Ologbo and say, well, we're taking over this place, it's our place. And they changed the citizenship of everybody there to the Russian passport, just to perhaps tell you that we have people of Russian descent, a very strong one living in that community. It's all strategic power play in the world of the superpowers. And hedge money plays the highest role. Russia is a very rich country, and now they've run to Russia as a way of implementing some kind of like assistance. If they felt like
we are coming to that point, going to Russia, appealing to them to please come over to help us, you know, quell this unrest. Before we get to that stage, Kazim said something, you know, the President Kazim said, so he said, look, you guys that are involved in this protest, you guys that are involved in this riot, despite the fact that the hike in the gas price was rescinded, you guys kept on protesting. This is a coup d'etat. Do you share his views and opinion?
Yeah, well, you see, just before you mentioned this, I've already said that if he says the proposed price hike has been returned back to its original state, and for some reason the people are still protesting, then it goes beyond just the price of the gas. It's just like the Int'L, they have like an entry strategy now to get the government out of the way, probably because they've been there for over almost 20 years or more, because since 1991 the same people has been in power. You know, corruption in the country is pretty much high, but you know, in this society that we live in the modern world, there's selfishness across the board. Whether it is a pure Western countries or in the Eastern Hemisphere, from Eastern Germany and beyond to Kazakhstan or Yugoslavia, Lithuania, or whatever you call it, and the Russian being the godfather in those areas, there's always the kind of a trend of how they behave. It takes a very strong and civilized society to respect certain things that has been, you know, triggered. So the people that are not for the government are probably financing something in the likes of what they say about Nigeria Boko Haram. You know, when people are getting money to do certain things, when poverty is so high, the problem becomes difficult to solve. And then obviously the president, you expect him to say that at this point, because at the end of the day, it's more like, well, I'll do whatever I want, but when the people rise, he has to find a political landing. He has to find a landing to say, well, we'll return the price. Why are you guys still fighting?
Because like what you said, it has its political undertone. Yeah,
most definitely, and that is how it is. Like I always tell people, there was a day I was sitting here on the studio and I was having a conversation with Emmanuel Akbalolo, and they talked about the governor of Kogi State, Yahaya Bello, and how the people said his XYZ in terms of his governance has not been good. I said, I'm not judging him because I don't live there. But at the same time, even if the state is as good as Dubai in terms of infrastructure, there's still a certain segment of people that may be disenfranchised or dissatisfied with a certain aspect and style of governance. So that is why governance is a very difficult thing. And to capture the different aspects and create a balance is why we have representatives from those areas. So there are people who don't want the president to be there no matter what you do, and that is here to stay. So when two elephants fight, whether from his comfort zone and the government in power who says, well, can't have your way here. The grass is suffer. The people are just the grass.
Now this man we are seeing right here on the screen, President Vladimir Putin of Russia, has been called upon by Kazim, the president of Kazakhstan, to please come to their aid.
Yes.
Them inviting Russia into all this. Do you see a headway in all of this? Don't forget that Russia also have this involvement in Ukraine. They also have, they say also somehow in Georgia. They have, they say also in Afghanistan until they got angry and left because of US interference. It's like Russia is almost everywhere in that region. Bringing Putin into this, do you think is going to go well? Even in their own capital, Almaty, the Russian presence is highly felt.
Yeah, well, I think bringing the Russian president in as a superpower in that region would definitely help to create that kind of like a retrogressive look from the people who are constantly doing what they're doing, because the network that they have goes far and wide. You know, the people that are supporting why the uprising is not ending can then be tackled from that international level. You know, Russians will always demand things from the US 90% or 95% of the time they get it. Just like when the US demands certain things. So all these things that are happening, the Russians and the Western countries, the US, the United Kingdom, the Germans, they know those that are wanting that government to be sacked. Because if the president of that particular government is of the Russian alignment, because the Russian will say, well, this was a Soviet Union establishment or region or colony. Even if we're no longer directly under the Russian territory or federation, they still have the influence by planting the person that went there. So for the party to be in power all this while, and there's so much poverty, that already tells you that there's already a political influence as to who sits in the office as president. That is exactly what was happening in Ukraine. So Russia will not let you come to their territory and have an establishment of a base there, whereby you have a US or European aligned president in Kazakhstan. They will never allow it. So bringing in Russia is like bringing the big boys to the round table. And I'm quite sure that in time would help to, you know,
all right, now from your analysis, are you now pointing to the fact that somewhere along the line we have external players that are anti-Russian in this squabble that is going on in Afghanistan? Do you suspect any big players, like maybe let's say the West? Is it Kazakhstan? Yes, is it the West? Is it the EU? Is it anyone that is anti-Russia that is there pushing this pawn, making the protest to go beyond expectations?
Well, the truth be told, I've followed a lot of international conflicts over the years. I've been to Russia. Trust me, it's not a very easy place. It's very cold, you know, and there will definitely be that undertone, that, you know, the masquerade, the skeletons in the cupboard, the big masquerade behind this whatever. And with Russia having influence in North Korea, there's never a time, no matter the kind of negotiations they have, that the US and the Western countries, especially the United Kingdom or whatnot, will not have resentment for Russia. You know, as long as the US is backing the Israeli to protect them from, in quote, the enemies surrounding that Israeli country as a state, like for example, Iran. The Russians has never seen nothing wrong with Iran's behavior towards Israel. And the US and the UK will never see anything wrong about Israel's behavior towards Iran. It's just everybody's protecting their own territory. It's all about power play, really. You know, if you're well and strong, you can choose to play football. If you're well and strong, you go to work. But if you're not well, you go to the hospital. So these issues of dominance and what superpower and the power shifting, that I'm the #1 man, it's a game that has been there and it will remain there even after our time and existence on this planet. So without doubt, you know, without procrastinating, I quite strongly believe that they know exactly what is happening. They believe that that Kazakhstan uprising could be something that has got to do with the, in quote, enemies of Russia. The things becomes petty at times when you see people like the owners of Chelsea Football Club, Roman Abramovich, getting their tweet and messed up because he has some sort of affiliation with Russia government, and the UK will refuse to give him visa to come back to England, even if he has hundreds of millions of pounds worth of investment in England. It shows to you how these things can move from the general overview from everyday life to our bedrooms, and to those who are in the power play will never hold back, because the minute they pinpoint you as not their allies and they feel that there's a strategic value, that battle will continue. Even when it seems to be okay, they pretend to sit around. Americans and the Russians and the UK, they will sit down and talk in G8 or whatever.
G7.
G7, for example, or G20. But at the same time, they have differences that will always remain, that can never be resolved. Those are individual differences, and unfortunately, this is just the reasons why problems constantly exist in this world, and it has no solution anytime soon, from my understanding.
All right, now do you see a replica of what happened in Ukraine happening in Kazakhstan? Because it started also almost like this in Ukraine, where you have the pro-EU and of course the pro-Russian, you know, squabbling and fighting amongst themselves. So that started with just a little protest. It led to Russia annexing Crimea, a part of Ukraine, and right now we're having the same thing almost happening in Kazakhstan.
You see, I think Crimea was kind of in the borderline closer to the Russian Federation. So it was easy for the Russians to get the armament and the heavy equipment into that area and constantly supply Crimea natives weapons to defend themselves against a federal government headed by a Ukrainian president who was pro-American or pro-Western country. You see, there's a slight difference between what happened with Crimea and in Ukraine and this particular instance. In Ukraine, you had a pro-European and pro-American president who was only fighting for a particular territory which is in the borders of Russia, perhaps through political or strategic or warfare kind of, you know, positioning, or maybe through these natural resources, because I think Crimea is very rich in oil.
In oil and gas.
Gas. And but with this instance with Kazakhstan, the Russians, most likely from the way things are playing now, has the central government, and is more closer to the territories, closer to the Russian Federation. So I don't think the situation will be the same, because that was more like the whole country against a particular section, and Russia was still able to come and change it around and do whatever they want. Heaven did not fall, irregardless of American threat. And in this case, they have a Russian pro-Russian president. I think it's a whole different ballgame, actually. Completely different ballgame. I don't see the two happening in the same way. I think the most that will happen after a while, those things will be settled. For the Russians to come in now, it's probably because they know that perhaps maybe the protesters are still fighting with their bare hands. I don't think they've actually gotten support or military support yet. And these are why these territorial things and what they do geographically and strategically helps to kind of fend off anybody who wants to try. You know, look at the armaments that is moving. All these are Russian presence. And it's
Going
to quickly
into Almaty, going to Kazakhstan to make their presence felt
because
in this
the Russians are telling you whoever is sitting there is just an extension of Russia. You know, the president might be of Russian descent. You know, a lot of people that live in Eastern Germany to Western Europe, they have Russian descent in them. You know, even I think the past U.S. president, Donald Trump, also kind of has some kind of Russian lineage in him. So it is just the way it is. And unfortunately, I don't believe that the situation with Crimea or Ukraine will be the same as this, because Russia is going there too well. We are fighting from inside out rather than fighting from the outside in. I think the border thing, where Russia was strategically positioned, helped the Crimea issue, whereby they came in from the outside and did what they did. So I think it's a slightly different situation, but similar in terms of uprising.
Okay. Now, before we call it a wrap on this show, it's like Russia is trying to, according to reports, trying to extend, you know, her reach towards those other regions that were formerly with the Soviet Union. How true is this hypothesis? Because in Ukraine, they're doing the same thing. In Kazakhstan, you know the story too well. In Georgia, also Poland, you just name it. All those regions that were once upon a time, you know, in the Soviet Union. Is that what you feel Russia is trying to do right now?
Most definitely. It has always been so. Remember the Crimea situation? It got so bad, Russians threatened, before they moved in with the military, that they were going to stop supply of gas to Ukraine. Yeah. And they were also going to cut off supply of gas to the whole of Europe. Unfortunately, the gas supply that the Europeans depend on are all from Russia. So if the U.S. constantly intervene, because that's why I told you Russia is extremely rich. It's a very powerful country. Militarily, financially, they're strong. Just that the corruption level there is higher than you would ordinarily say the way it's made, you know, the way it's made to look than the European countries. So I think at the end of the day, Russia will just go there and do the needful, and they'll constantly reach out to the people around them so that they don't get strength beyond our age. The USSR was big, but now it's divided into smaller nations. If they feel any threat, they will do that. Whether diplomatically or militarily. Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate a wonderful analysis. This is your debut, and I'm so impressed. Not to worry, you have enough time to come talk international affairs, international politics on International Forum. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for having me. I appreciate your coming. Thank you. All right, it's now time for us to join the live studio for AFCON 2022 with Beston Bere standing by. Bye for now.